Hello and welcome to Greek for the Rest of Us, Chapter 11. Today we're going to be looking at modifiers. This is going to be somewhat of a review in some ways of Chapter 6 and also Chapter 9, where we started talking about prepositions, and in the section where we talked about participles, because both of those can function as modifiers, which is what we're going to be digging more into today. So Chapter 11 is talking about modifiers. First, a couple things related to English, and then we'll jump into the Greek. So first, the article. The article in English, we have both the definite article and the indefinite article. The definite article is our word the, and the indefinite article is the word a or an in some cases. So the definite article is, in general, making a more general idea more specific. So I didn't just go to a party. That would be the indefinite article. I went to the party. It's taking a more general idea and boiling it down. It's not just a book, it's the book. So it's making something definite, which is why we have definite and indefinite article. In Greek, there is not a definite or an indefinite article. There's just one article, the word ha, which you've already learned, the omicron with the rough breathing mark over it, as you can see. That is the single most important Greek word to memorize, Mount says, and I think that is very true, and it is typically translated the. It's important to know that this is just the article, not the definite article, because in Greek there's not an indefinite article. So either there is an article, and in which case something is articular, or there is not an article, in which case it is anarthrous. So this is the article paradigm. You can see the way this is organized here. We have masculine, feminine, and neuter. And then we have the singulars here, and then the plurals. And then we have, I'll do these in different colors, nominative. There is genitive. There is dative, and then there are the accusatives. So you can read across here. So if, for example, you wanted to say, okay, I am looking for the feminine accusative singular. You'd look for, okay, feminine, I see accusative, and I see singular, so I see tain. Now this is really important to memorize this article paradigm, because if you can memorize these 24 forms of the article, when you recognize or see something like tois in a translation or in a verse, you know instantly that the word that this is modifying and attached to, because it agrees, is going to be also a neuter, dative, plural noun, which means you've already gotten some information. It's either going to be neuter or it's going to be masculine, because it could be either. So you'd have to know something about the noun. But instantly you're going to be able to say, all right, it's modifying something plural. So even if you haven't memorized the noun endings, if you've memorized the article endings or the articles, you'll be able to quickly recognize some words. So highly, highly recommend committing this to memory. This should be committed to memory. So memorize this. It will be worth your time spent putting this to memory. And it is important as you're memorizing those to keep in mind the smooth breathing or the rough breathing marks here. And it is helpful to be aware of the accents also. But the key are these rough breathing marks to be aware of in the nominative singular and the nominative plural for the masculine and the feminine articles. So that is the article paradigm in Greek. So, as was just mentioned, the word ha will be, this is called agreement, will be in the same case, number, and gender as the word it modifies. So that's illustrated here in 1 Timothy 4:9, where we read, and I'll highlight the words as we go, pistos, ha, logos, kai, passes, apodokes, axios. And here what's being highlighted is right here, the word the is modifying faithful. So the is modifying faithful. And Actually, it's connected both to word also because both are modifying logos, so I should clarify that. But the thing to note is that the word here, the, ha, is in the nominative. We'll actually get to how we know that trustworthy or faithful is modifying word also. We'll do that a little bit further down. But the thing to see there is that the nominative article is modifying the nominative logos, and furthermore, it's singular, and it's in the masculine. So you're going to see agreement between the article and what it's modifying. In 11.6, we read that Greek uses ha when English does not use the definite article. And an example of this would be before personal names. You'll see things like ha Petros, the Peter, for example, which is obviously not how we would translate it. We wouldn't put the in front of every proper name or personal name. But in Greek, you're going to see ha showing up in places you wouldn't expect it to show up. But then the flip side of that is the article is not always used when English requires the definite article. So in that case, you could add it back in as the translator, knowing that, okay, just because I don't see the article ha doesn't mean I don't need it in English. So there's cases in which smoothing out the translation means you're going to either drop the article when it was there in Greek, or you're going to add the article back in, or add an article back in English. So that's just a little bit about when it's added or taken away. And then last couple things here on 11.8, a couple ways that the article can function. The article can function as a personal pronoun. So rather than seeing autos, which is our normal Greek personal pronoun, you might just see ha or some form of ha functioning as a he or a him or a they, depending on what case it's in and what function it's performing. But you're going to see it as a personal pronoun. And then similarly, you might see the article ha functioning as a possessive pronoun. So his wife, for example, or other passages where you're going to read the possessive pronoun. So basically, when you're thinking about the article, don't be surprised to find a lot of flexibility when you're translating ha. So don't be too bound up in, I see the Greek article, I need to add the. Not necessarily. That's the most common way that it's translated, but sometimes it would actually be incorrect to see the definite article, or the Greek article, and convert that into the English definite article. Again, there's just some different things going on between a language that only has an article, in this case Greek has the article, whereas in English we have a definite and an indefinite article. So the article itself does not grammaticalize definiteness in Greek. All right, that's a little bit about the article, and we will move on to talking about English adjectives now. All right, picking back up with the English adjective. So an adjective in English is a word that modifies a noun or a pronoun, or it can modify another adjective. There are three functions of the adjective in English. An adjective can either function adjectively, which is also called attributively. It's attributing something to something else. So it's giving an attribute. The example would be like the red car. So it is, the word red is an adjective, and it is functioning in that sentence, the red car, attributively because it's giving an attribute of the car. The car has the attribute of redness. So it's the red car. So it's called simply the adjectival function. But then we also have the substantival function. The substantival function, this would be an example that Mounce gives is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Good, bad, and ugly are all adjectives, but they can also good, the bad, and the ugly are all adjectives, but they can function substantively in this case. So that's the substantival use. And then there's the predicate use. The predicate use is when we're supplying a to be verb. And an example of this would be the Bible is black, where we see the word for predication. So you have the noun is something. That's called the predicate use. So those are the three adjective use types in English, and then we have the same three in Greek. So in Greek, you're going to see the same three adjective uses. There's the adjectival use, or the attributive use. There's the it can be used. I'm sorry. This is a this should say substantively, not substantially. Same here. Substantively. There's the V in there. Let me write that out. Substant. I will correct that in the PDF before it's uploaded, but substantively is the word that should be. So the Greek adjective can function either adjectively, substantively, or in the predicate. So very similar to English in that regard, the three main uses, and then now we'll illustrate those uses. So the adjectival use of the Greek adjective. An example here from Matthew 4:5. Tate paralambane auton ha diabolos eis tein hagion pollen. I should have been highlighting those as I went, but roughly the way that Mounce does that in his interlinear is, then he took him, the devil, into the holy city. So we see an example here of where word order, in English, that word order almost sounds like the devil's being taken somewhere. Now, of course, context would cue us in otherwise. But first thing we recognize is that this is in the, and if you memorized your article paradigm, you would know just from this alone, this is the nominative case. And the nominative case is generally going to be the subject of the sentence. It's the subjective case. So that's exactly what we see here. So this is the subject. Ha diabolos is the subject. And then we have over here a verb. Paralambane. This is the verb. And then we have here auton, which is in the accusative case. And you would be able to notice that from either mousing over it in your interlinear, your logos, whatever you're using. But one thing I want to point out here is that you could actually kind of look back at your article paradigm and remember, okay, the article, if it ends in omicron nu, the masculine singular accusative article ends in omicron nu. And you can make an educated guess that, hey, auton, that looks kind of similar. That looks similar to that ton article. I wonder if that's in the accusative. And then when you look it up, you'd find, indeed, that's the case. So if you figure out the article paradigm and memorize the article paradigm, it's going to give you a lot of clues as you're going through and translating things. So that is in the accusative, which means in this case, this is the direct object. And then we have, the devil took him into, and we have here is one big prepositional phrase. Prep phrase. And then what's going on in this prepositional phrase is we have, of course, our preposition. And then we have an article, hagion, which is an adjective. And then you have pollen, which is a noun. And it is a noun in the accusative. And you can know that because tain, if you look at this, you go back to your article paradigm, where do you find tain? Bingo. Feminine, accusative, singular. So we know we're dealing with a feminine, accusative, singular article, and that is modifying the noun. Now, if we look, what I did here is I diagrammed this, and this is the first time in these videos that you're seeing a diagram, so don't be overwhelmed. I may post a second video explaining how to understand these diagrams, but basically your simple diagram is going to look like this, where you have subject, verb. If you have a vertical line, that's your direct object, and now anything underneath that is modifying. So subject, verb, direct object. Subject in this case is Satan, diabolos. I'm going to just highlight where this is coming from. And then we have our verb, here. And then auton is here. So that's your main heading, but you may have noticed that I have placed, I'm going to erase some of this. I've placed ha underneath diabolos. That's because ha is also functioning adjectively. So although this illustration is primarily talking about holy, ha is functioning adjectively as a attributive to diabolos. So ha is underneath diabolos, and we also have a couple other modifications happening, and these we'll talk about them later. This one here is an adverbial modifier and another adverbial modifier because it's underneath the verb. So what's underneath the verb is listed as an adverb, but here we have over here our hagion. And how do we handle our hagion? So that's illustrated with the way that this is laid out here. So we have pollen. Tain modifies pollen adjectively. That's why this is listed directly underneath pollen. And then hagion is also modifying pollen. So hagion, because it's in the attributive position, is going to go immediately underneath pollen. Again, you don't have to get too bogged down in this diagram. This is meant to just visually represent what's going on here and give a kind of a visual summary to, okay, here we have two, technically between this we have 1, 2, 3 adjectival modifiers in this sentence, because this is a noun, diabolos, and then pollen is a noun. So those things that are modifying nouns, which again that's what an adjective does. It modifies a noun or a pronoun. And if I look and say, okay, what nouns are being modified? Nothing is modifying auton, and then those are the only other nouns in the sentence are pollen and diabolos. So hopefully that diagram helps illustrate adjectival adjectives, or attributive adjectives. And then now we have 11:16, which talks about agreement, which we've already been touching on, but agreement, an attributive adjective will agree with the word it modifies in case, in number, and in gender, just like the article. So we saw that illustrated right here, where ha is in the same case, gender, and number as diabolos. And then here we see it in pollen, where that is in the accusative, singular, feminine, and that's the same for this, and same for this. So there's going to be agreement, which is going to be really helpful for you identifying what article goes with what adjective goes with what. And again, software will help you find those connections, but when you're thinking through what is this word really related to, checking the case can be really helpful for that. The other function that the adjective has is substantively. So it can function substantively. I pulled an example here from Wallace, which is a different textbook on page 295, where he references Romans 17b, Romans 1:17b. Ha de dikaios ek pisteos zesetai. So he's putting in bold here to highlight the fact that de dikaios is actually what's functioning substantively here. And then we go over to the next page and we see his translation of it. But the righteous person shall live by faith. So the righteous, and I should have not broken up this, but the dikaios here, if you've memorized your vocabulary properly, you'll know dikaios. Wait a second, that's an adjective. That's not a noun. So then how is Paul using this to mean the main thing that's being talked about? And then we realize, well, actually, this is just a substantive. It's a substantive use of the adjective. So this is diagrammed accordingly, where you see dikaios as the subject being modified by ha, and is the subject of the verb, the zesetai, shall live by, future tense verb, shall live by faith, shall live, and then ek pisteos, by faith, where faith is here functioning adverbially. Well, the prepositional phrase by faith is functioning adverbially because it's modifying this verb. Again, we'll get to adverbs in just a moment. So that is the substantive use. We'll talk about the predicate position next. All right, now we're going to talk about the predicate position for the adjective. So just like in English, the Greek anarthrous adjective, that is anarthrous meaning no article, can also be in the predicate. So I'm going to reference diagramming again here. When you have just a simple diagram, this line right here is the predicate line. And it's telling you that kind of imaginary line, everything on this side is predicate or predicated, and everything on this side is subject. So if you're talking about something in the predicate position, it's going to be something that shows up on the right side of the predicate line. So an example of this would be in Matthew 7:13. Plateia, he pule, kai urakoros, he hudos. So what we have here is the word for wide, the gate, and there is a space there, but Mounts just put them together. Kai, our word for and. Urakoros, sorry. He hadas. So the gate is, and if you read in your translation, you'll see this. There's the is that shows up. Wait a second. The gate is wide. The way is easy. And if you've learned the word for is, a me, you're realizing, wait a second, a me isn't here anywhere. So where did is come from? Well, this is the predicate position. And when you're in the predicate position, the is implied. So you don't actually have to have it in the translation. So what this would look like diagrammed is you have pule, he, functioning as the subject. You have an implied is, which when you're diagramming, I recommend putting it in English and brackets to make very clear this word is one I'm putting on the diagram. It's not in the text. And then we have plateia. And now that's just this line with a slant to this side tells me that this is the predicate. This is predicated. Everything here is predicated. So it's almost like a little ramp that's reminding you to launch back and look at it. It's telling me something about the noun. So that is one use of the adjective, and then you see the same thing down here. So that is the predicate position of the adjective, and it appears very regularly. A couple comments about English-Greek interlinears. Position is going to be key for looking at the word order, and that's something you're really only going to see if you're reading it in the Greek word order. So if you're looking at a Greek text and highlighting words you don't know, or if you're looking at a true Greek-English interlinear, if you're using a reverse interlinear, which is what a lot of Bible software does, if you just click on the word or the letter key at the top, you're going to miss out on this. You're not going to see this. So this is the Greek-English interlinear. So the first thing, really the only thing here is the position to note. There's a few different positions. Greek adjectives are not always right before the noun as in English. So there's attributive positions, and then there's also predicate positions. And then these are just common terms: the first attributive position, the second attributive position, the first predicate position, and the second predicate position. The first attributive position is when, and then you're thinking here word order, so reading left to right. As you're reading in the sentence, there's the first thing you encounter is the article, adjective, noun. Okay, if I see article, adjective, noun, I know I'm dealing with the first attributive position. If I see article, noun, article, adjective, such as the Spirit, the Holy, I know I'm dealing with the second attributive position, and I can translate that, the Holy Spirit. But then if I encounter adjective, article, noun, I'm dealing with something that is predicate. And if I encounter article, noun, adjective, I know I'm dealing with predicate. key thing to note here, in both of these, the article, in both of the predicate positions, the article is anarthrous. That means without the article. Anarthrous. So if you have an anarthrous adjective, it could be substantival. Substantival is not listed here. Another option is substantival. But if you have no article, your first thought is predicate. This is telling me something about the noun in a way that I need to supply is when I go to translate this. But then you'll note that up here, in the attributive position, you have article and then adjective, article and then adjective. So here, it's going to be articular. So that is a little bit about positioning. And then lastly, the adverb. The adverb is talked about in 11.26. An adverb, again, this is a modifier. It's something that's modifying something in the sentence. An adverb is a word or phrase that modifies specifically a verb or an adjective or another adjective. So an adverb is not something that modifies the noun. I just want to go back through our diagrams to highlight a couple adverbs. Here we have live, zeisetai, but then we have ek pistuos. So here we know that ek pistuos, by faith, is modifying live. And live is a verb, which makes this an adverb. The whole phrase together is functioning as an adverb. So that's going to be shown in a diagram by having it directly underneath the verb. And then if we hop over to Matthew 4:5, we see two more adverbs here. First is tate. Tate is actually the first word that showed up in the order of the verse. Then, and this is telling me something about the time when this verb took place. So, tate is adverbial, modifying he took, but then also eis pollen, into city, because this is telling me something about where he took him. So it's answering questions about the verb and clarifying the verb. So there's two adverbs there. All right, that is it for adverbs. We'll just go through the vocabulary very quickly. So hagios means holy, or in the plural, it means saints. So it's, again, we're talking an adjective here. So when it's in the plural, think substantive, think saints. Allos means other or another. Heis means one. Heis. The feminine form of this is mia. So heis, mia, or hen is the neuter. But heis is the key one to know for looking it up in a lexicon. It's one. Megos is great or large. Pas, in the singular, it means each or every, but in the plural, it means all. Polus means much or many, and then another sense of it would be great or large. And then protos means first. Kathos, as or just as. Hutos means thus, so, or in this manner. This one's really important when we think about John 3:16. I encourage you to go look up John 3:16 in the Greek and see what you learn about hutos, and see what knowing this word does in your understanding of John 3:16. And then tate, which we just saw in our example, means then. I'll also add that you should consider the article paradigm as part of your vocabulary for this week. To learn that article paradigm, all 24 forms, be able to fill that chart in, is going to help you enormously in your translation work. All right, that is it for Chapter 11 on modifiers. Thank you.